All right, Daniel. So, from where we want to start is that why should the audience be excited about this conversation today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I would guess to answer that question, I would point out a little bit of the kind of weird journey I've been on throughout my life.
Yeah.
Uh, I definitely never followed the traditional path, at least anything that would have been prescribed for me based on what you might have expected someone kind of dealt my hand based on where I grew up, my family upbringing, the history of how they kind of went through
Hmm.
their lives. If you looked at my family, I lived in probably the poorer side of things, growing up in the Midwestern part of the United States. My mother didn't finish high school. My father finished high school, but didn't go to college. And, they were doing the best they could. They had me first. And then I had two brothers, and we ended up moving 12 times. Every other year, we'd end up moving somewhere.
Hmm.
My dad dealt with bankruptcy, dealt with all kinds of challenging things. And so
Hmm.
for me, I was always a new kid, very shy, very introverted, just really struggling, to be honest. Dealing with a lot of bullying, a lot of stuff, and it just really kind of felt repressive. And my life was defined. I mean, as a child, you're defined by your environment. So my
Right.
environment was struggle, right? Not being able to afford shoes, not knowing anybody, trying to figure out why people acted the way they did. And I really didn't know who I was. All I knew was I didn't fit in very well
Hmm.
compared to others. My brother, for instance, would thrive in these environments. Very charming person, very
Hmm.
extroverted, but that kind of bit him in a weird way because it pulled him into some of the shadier, seedier sides of things in those environments. A lot more of like drugs and stuff like that, where I didn't really have those things coming my way, as I don't think I had the personality for it either. But really, it was an internal drive to leave that environment that started my journey. And as I'm trying to figure out how to get out of it, really what I'm seeing is the only thing I could control was my own self, like my own education. And from there, I was hoping to springboard out of my environment. So I
Hmm.
really took school seriously, like more than almost all of my friends, all of my classmates. And it worked. Like I had a almost perfect GPA. I was in many AP classes without even knowing what those were. I was just getting placed in these good classes and doing well. And I remember towards the end of high school conversations with teachers about, okay, which college are you going to? And I had never even considered college. It wasn't something we really talked about in my family. My parents hadn't done it. There was no financial plan for it.
Hmm.
So it was kind of, I don't know, what should I do? And so I started looking into it. And this is before Google existed, by the way. I'm dating myself a little bit age wise,
Hmm.
but I did what the types of searches I could do at the time, and I learned that if I were to go to one of the schools in state, it would be a lot more affordable. And so I applied to three schools in state. I got accepted to all of those. My dad and my mom actually started to come around on the idea that I would go. My dad became very supportive of that, which is great. And we went and toured those places, and I picked one within my state.
Right.
I went to a college called the Ohio State University, and that was where the transformation started to begin
Hmm.
because there I'm figuring out who I am. I'm with people who, had already broken a mold that I'd grown up with, right? People who are more thinking about the world, more diversity, more,
Yeah.
ideas. And
Mhm.
it was wonderful. I ended up meeting my wife there, which was fantastic. I'm going and taking everything from linguistics to psychology to computer science, and I ended up majoring in computer science, not because that was what I thought I should do, but
Hmm.
because I was being pragmatic. I had no money, there's no
Hmm.
plan, so we borrowed everywhere we could,
Hmm.
and to the point where we were getting denied left and right. There was no money to borrow at some point, and I thought I wasn't going to be allowed to stay in school, and it was very stressful and very defining. And I'll get to later how this becomes massive success. I ended up working at the largest companies in the world, all kinds of crazy stuff. But at the time, I really thought it was just an end of the path. Like I started to see life could be brighter and bigger,
Hmm.
but then the door was shutting super fast because I just didn't have the money for
Hmm.
those opportunities. Luckily, we were able to find ways to borrow the money through my mother because she had the best credit, even though she hadn't really worked very much. They
Hmm.
said fine,
Yeah.
and then I was able to stay in school, and
Hmm.
I remember researching. I had to pick a degree,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to. I wanted to. I knew every minute mattered. I didn't have time to be undecided. I had to know what I was doing. So I had done some research online, and I saw that in my state, at least, I should have looked broader, but in my state, the top new salary was computer programming.
Hmm.
And I said, well, okay, I'll go do that. And that was the only reason I picked it. And so I ended up majoring in computer science, even though out of all the subjects I took,
Hmm.
math was my worst. I was very much a creative type, but I was like, okay, I will stretch, I will figure this out. And I struggled with the math stuff. I mean, I had when I was directly enrolling, the head of the engineering department, she told me to not do it. She said, you will fail. You will not, your math is not strong enough. You're going to have to
Hmm.
take two classes to even start with the math, two extra classes. She said, there's no way you'll be able to do it. And I said, I have to do it. I'm going to just do this. So I guess I had that grit early on to
Hmm.
get out of there and do something with myself. I knew that I needed a salary if I was going to pay off this debt. And so I picked it. I went in and I did. I remember that first exam. It was called Math 148. I completely failed. I mean, it was like under 50%. And it was just world shattering. So I had tried. I really did. And then I went into the classroom, and this was a huge class. There's like hundreds of people in this class. I remember going in there and the professor pulling up the scores, and the average was around what I had. So
Hmm.
everybody failed. Like there's a couple of outliers, of course, but pretty much everyone failed. And they went, yeah, you guys did about what I thought you'd do. And here's the curve. And they curved it all the way back up. That shocked me. It
Hmm.
shocked me that one they would purposely weed people out like that.
Hmm.
It was a gut punch, but also just it was a lesson about life. Life will purposely put you through the ringer to see what you're capable of. So I was
Hmm.
starting to learn that at an early age, and these are lessons that end up defining me later in life. And
Hmm.
we can get into it, but I really climbed and climbed and climbed throughout the next 20 years, dealing with my financial catastrophe where I started, dealing with my social disadvantage, dealing
Hmm.
with trying to get out of my economic situation that was dealt to me as a hand of cards and create something for myself, but not just for myself, for
Hmm.
my family, for any kids I would have, for my generation. I wanted to break the standard I was in, and I actually accomplished it. And I ended up retiring young. I retired at the age of 43. So
Great.
not only did I beat my financial situation, but I am now teaching others how to do that.
Okay. Now, lots of questions coming up to my mind right now, based on that. But let's get to it. The first thing I want to know is that this hole that people are in, right, especially when it comes to financial situations, right, it becomes a huge driver or a motivator to try something out of the blue, or just the first thing that gets you out of the situation, right? And I guess you did what you had to do at that point of time. And it's just that it's just coming to my mind, right? Getting straight A's or something of that sort did just work out for you, and you basically played out to what the conventional method was, right? But what was it that was different that you did, that you actually managed to retire early? Because when people talk about this conventional method of get straight A's or be successful in school, get to a good college, get the best program, get a good job, they usually talk about regular retirement, right? You work through
Yeah.
your life, you love work 40 or 45 years, and
Yeah.
then you're set. But then you managed to exit at 43. So what was the, if I could just say one thing that you did different than what
Sure.
everybody else was doing?
Let me answer that in two ways. Because first, I think we should set the stage a little bit for
Mhm.
what the traditional model is kind
Mhm.
of designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can talk about differences and what happened with me. And actually, I kind of stumbled on that, and I'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about that part because that's part of the journey as well. But if you think about the system itself, at least I'm going to talk about the United States because that's just where I've experienced. Other parts of the world could be different here, but in the United States, you very much start in a negative net worth. You
Uh-huh.
have all liabilities, no income,
Mm-hmm.
not really even any social or human capital yet, right? You don't have the skills yet. You haven't gone through the education. Now, there is a public education system in the United States, but it's very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so the type of learning that you're getting is not always sufficient to get the human capital that you need to get the type of income that you desire for the life, quality of life, or the standard of life that you might be hoping for.
Yeah.
Yet society puts a signal out that status is important. Think about celebrity worship or movies and all that stuff. And the idea
Yeah.
that the kind of car you drive, the clothes you wear, the way you present yourself is important. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the signal that you need to display wealth, but the system is actually designed to entrap you into debt. And
Yeah.
so borrowing, I mean, just anyone who might not be following, let me just say it this way. How easy was it to get a credit card? How hard is it to find a high yield, a savings account that will pay you over 1%?
That's right.
Think about that. A savings account will not pay you over 1%, but your credit card will take up to 30%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
system designed to keep you borrowing and in debt. So if you realize, oh, I have to pay, costs are always going up, I
Yeah.
have to put that on my credit card. You do, but you end up in survival mode. And you're just playing into the system when that happens. Advertisements entrap you more, social media will trap you more. All these things are designed to entrap. Now, that's not to say these things can't be there. They can. That system can exist and that system can thrive while people use it responsibly, but people aren't taught how to be using it responsibly.
That's
There's not
right.
a class in school that teaches you proper social media usage. There's
Yeah.
not a class in school that teaches you how to properly do finance. Now,
Yes.
there are people like me who are teaching and trying to fill the gap, and some schools are serious about that, but it's not a required part of a curriculum.
Yeah.
So there's that system. And just to finish that model real quick, even if you get a job, and most people do, but
Mhm.
imagine whatever trajectory you're on, there's almost different rungs that you take for the amount of income you can make. You're
Yeah.
either going to be someone who got a degree, and then with that degree, you're going to start at a new segment of trajectory than someone without a degree. On top of that, you might get a specialized certification or something that might set you apart into a middle rung,
Mhm.
or you start a business. And doing that is really, really risky. You talk about all liabilities, more borrowing, taking a gamble, but that is a bet. And you're
Yes.
betting that business is going to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
All those things. Well, then there's social welfare. There's things where you don't really have income, but you're consuming and getting support. All those things have trajectories to them.
Mm-hmm.
So really early in life sets you on one of these trajectories. And it's hard. You can switch to one later, but it becomes harder. And the system is designed to kind of not advocate for you later in life to switch your trade or your skill
Yeah.
or get an education. So all these things are really kind of predefined. And once you're on a trajectory, then the idea is, well, just set yourself apart, work really, really hard. You do that, you're going to be okay. That used to be true in the United States, maybe up
Mhm.
until the 1980s when
Mhm.
pensions and things were still common. And the idea was you give yourself to a company, that loyalty is rewarded through them giving you back part of that salary for the rest of your years. Well, when they got rid of pensions and moved towards a 401k system, that who does that really benefit?
Yeah.
You think about it for a second. Who's really benefiting from a 401k? Is it the retiree or is it the brokerage system, the investment
Yeah.
system, the Wall Street system? Now,
Mhm.
I'm not saying don't do your 401k. I'm actually going to talk about how important that is. So don't get me wrong here.
Yeah.
But you think about the system for a moment.
Hmm.
You can do all the right things. You can go and let's say you were careful with your credit card. Let's say you went to college.
Hmm.
Let's say you worked really hard, and let's say you did your 401k match. You could do all of that and you're still going to be forced to retire at 65 or 67.
Hmm.
And even then, you're going to be on some, I'm a little bit worried about money every year.
Yeah.
That's your life.
Hmm.
That's called what I call autopilot.
Yeah.
That's someone, a responsible person on autopilot. I was on that for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very organized. I track things. I'm very data oriented. And when I was getting my debt dealt with in my journey early, once I graduated college, I had gotten a job and I was looking at my spending. I was looking at, I had just gotten married. I was looking at, we were thinking about buying a house. We wanted to have a kid. And all the expenditure was so high. All the borrowing, all the school loan. I had over $100,000 in school loans to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
We had credit cards that had started to build up, and I finally had income. My spouse didn't. She was in graduate school, so I was also helping her with her tuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm seeing all these costs, and I'm seeing finally have an income, and
Mm-hmm.
that income after deductions, all those like taxes, everything that gets taken away, it was insufficient.
Yeah.
I would be just chipping, not really ever getting ahead. So I had to get serious about it. So I started like really tracking carefully, knowing what I could afford. I started self educating, is what I was doing, getting myself financially literate. And throughout the period of the next 20 years, as I was continuously trying to get myself more and more financially literate, I woke up and broke out of autopilot mode.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, wow, I'm on a different trajectory that no one else is on.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have created cash flow here, which will allow me to have more than enough money for what I need
Mm-hmm.
to live at a specific earlier age without work. I don't
Right.
need a paycheck anymore. So that was what it was different, is through data. I've realized I was going to be okay. And then I started talking to financial, like people, you know, and asking them, hey, am I crazy? Like, what's going on? It looks like I could retire very young here. Is this true? And they're
Yeah.
like, they looked at it. They said, you have a 99% confidence here from us that you could do this. I kept getting that over and over, but I didn't believe it. I didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
that. So I can talk about the psychology a bit later. That transition is really interesting. But I will say throughout that journey, even though I was making big moves, trying to do the best I could, it is a little bit of a cash flow game. And once you understand where to put the right amount of money in the right places and let compound growth do its thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. It's amazing how your money starts working for you. You create a snowball,
Yeah.
and it does take time. Time is critical here. I think this is what people don't understand. There is no get rich quick thing ever. There's a do well once thing, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't repeat it. That's the problem. Even if you built a business, how many people have built massive businesses successfully over and over and over? Even
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk acquired those businesses. You could argue maybe he built them up from there.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but I will
Mm-hmm.
say most people who have a big successful business,
Mm-hmm.
they don't replicate it. It was a big magic thing they were able to do in their life. Like that's not a strategy. That's not a financial freedom strategy. That's a bet. And I don't like bets. I'm not a gambler at all. I'm very risk averse. So for me, it was all about data, very trying to make very risk calculated financial moves and how much further that get me ahead. And things like high yield savings accounts,
Mm-hmm.
low cost investments, and really just living without debt. Those things just went so far, so fast. And I actually beat my goal.
Okay, I've heard about the snowball effect. I mean, you make small, I mean, continuously make small payments to your debts and then have good control of your cash flows, right? Since you're talking about cash flows, right? Uh, the first thing I want to ask is that you were doing a job, right? I mean, most 80 to 90% people are doing a job, living on a paycheck, okay, as you would call it. Now, the thing with paychecks is that it will come at a time and there's a fixed amount, right? But your expenses may or may not, I mean, it will decrease or increase, emergency or something of that sort. Now, you're saying that you looked at your expenses, you worked on the data and said that, okay, fine, my expenses are higher than my income at this point. From where, I mean, you see a deficit, right? That you're still at a point where income is lesser than expenses. So, did you use the conventional method of switching jobs, getting to a higher paycheck, or? was there anything, something else that you did other than that? Because obviously there is that one method, right, where you start jumping jobs at a point where, okay, fine, now I'm comfortable. Now I can start talking about savings and investments and something of that sort.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you think about cash flow, the two biggest pieces of control you have is your income and your spending. That's it. I mean, if you want, I'm just really dumbing it down for a second. Like if you think about it that way, so like, okay, if you're feeling financially strapped, okay, what am I going to do? I'm either going to spend less, change my spending, so use the cash flow I have from the job I have and make sure I can maybe get a little further with it, or you do something with it about your job. Now,
Hmm.
I make that sound way easier than it is. It's not like I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
like
yeah, that
anyone
is
can
true.
go and
Yeah.
just get some other job, right? But the truth is, it's an investment like anything else, right?
Hmm.
When you let's, for example, and a lot of people can, if you're on autopilot, this is really hard, and it's going to be hard to hear things like this. But if you're in an industry that's
Hmm.
diminishing, instead of waiting for it to become a problem, thinking proactively, like if especially if you have a plan and
Hmm.
say, okay, what new skills can I start to build now? Even if it means getting
Right.
another degree, going and doing an online class, something like that, whatever it is, certification. You can get a certification really quick, actually. You can, some of them you can do in months, whatever it is, just to build up your human capital so that you have the option to widen your net on what you can do, like moving within a company or to a
Hmm.
different competitor or to a
Hmm.
whole new industry. That's really, really smart. Now, I went back to school in my early retirement. I'm doing wealth management training and I'm learning, oh, okay, well, when you teach someone how to maintain their human capital in their lives, you teach them about getting insurance. That's not what I believe. I don't think, for me, that wasn't part of my plan. Like, oh, I lost my job. I better make sure I have insurance to protect me. Yes, insurance is important. But when you're young, you want to work. You have something you're
Yeah.
passionate, you have some drive. You don't want to just sit around and collect insurance. That's not
Hmm.
how you protect your human capital. What you do is you invest in yourself. That's how you protect your human capital. So you build skills. Learn. I mean, in my early retirement, I got into podcasting. I'm doing voice acting. I've been mastering my hobby, which is playing pool. I'm doing competitive billiards, spending time with family, working on my health, all these things. Your time is so precious. You only have
Hmm.
so much of it. You're also only going to have so much money in your life. It's a finite number. You just
Yeah.
don't know what the number is. You just don't know what it is. That's fine. The truth, though, is making moves is something you can do. You can affect your income. And so that's what I did. That was part of my plan. I was working in Ohio and I moved every job I could until I hit a ceiling. And I
Hmm.
realized no one else is going to pay me more than what I'm getting paid in this state. So I moved to another state. And a lot of people just will not do this. They don't want to move away from family or whatever. I get it. It's called geographic arbitrage. The idea that you actually move in order to change your financial situation. My wife is amazing. She agreed to do this. It was hard, but we
Hmm.
moved to Washington State so I could start working at companies like Microsoft or Google or Amazon. This was good for me in my industry. I would not recommend that to most people because Washington's very expensive.
Hmm.
It has no
Yeah.
state tax, but cost of living's high. So most people go, "Oh, you worked at Microsoft or Google. Of course you retired early." No, not at all. I Everyone I know that work at Microsoft, Google, guess what? They are not retiring early. They are
Yeah.
retiring at 65. None of them. Why? And a lot of them, most of them got paid more than me. The
Hmm.
difference is I had a financial plan. I control my
Hmm.
spending. I make sure I have that snowballing effect going through high yield savings account and
Hmm.
investments. And I just ensure that I actually track and I have a plan. I can make moves. Yeah. So income is a move and spending is a move. If you're aware of those two levers, you always have some control in
Hmm.
every situation. And I can talk more about that. We can talk about how mortgage, for instance, just really one last example. Let's say you want to own a house. And in the United States, you're most likely taking a mortgage. That mortgage, most people don't even understand how it works. There's a special schedule built into it, an amortization rate where you're paying all interest up front because they are making a bet against you. They are betting that you will not live in that house
Yeah.
more years than it takes to put any money into that house. That means you're not actually you might as well rent if you're doing it. If you're not living in the house
Yeah.
for at least 12 years, you should
Hmm.
be renting. You really should, because you're not actually investing in that. So
Hmm.
what I end up doing, I made a horrible mistake. I took a 30-year mortgage when I started out. I borrowed from the equity as soon as I had any, so I could put more in fixes into that old house.
Mm-hmm.
And then the housing crisis happened
All
around
right.
2006, 2007. And we ended up in new debt all over again. I had eliminated my debt, and then we were drowning in it again because of that. And I had to short sell that house. I had 3 mortgages at the time, and it was really, really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But we rebounded back from that. And then I realized, okay, I need to get a short term mortgage, even though the monthly rate's higher. So I took a 20-year mortgage because that's what we could afford. And I couldn't even get the whole 20% down payment, which
Mm-hmm.
was a mistake. I should have waited. But, we really had a family wanted a house. And so what I did is I created a schedule to pay down principal faster because
Yeah.
everything you pay over your payment goes into
That's principle.
principal.
Yes.
Right. So there's this thing when you don't have 20% down, you have to do this thing called private mortgage insurance or
Mm-hmm.
PMI, which means you have an extra fee on your bill every single month that is paying the insurance of the lender. So
Yeah.
you're paying for their protection. It helps you not at all. You could still get foreclosed. You could still lose your home, but you're paying them for their protection in case you can't pay.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. It's like the worst fee in the world. And it's punishing you for not having enough money when they took the bet on you. Well, guess what? When you have at least built that 20% up through the equity, they have to drop that PMI. They're not allowed to make you pay that anymore,
Mm-hmm.
which was a regulation that came out. But most of them don't drop it. They keep they keep charging you it. So most people don't know that. They just keep paying it. And then when you call them, like, hey, when you find out later, you call them, like, why did you keep doing that? Like, oh, whoops. Oh, you're right. And we had to, and you'll have paid it and it'll have been done. So, once you start understanding how these things work, you can start making moves. And so putting extra money into that mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're paying the same amount per month and
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're not getting ahead because your net worth isn't really moving,
Yeah.
you actually are because you're getting more into that home investment, even though it's illiquid, and you are moving your net worth because you have more principal building up and you can start dropping fees, which then snowball that investment faster. So there's these little things once you start to know and you do
Mm-hmm.
enough of those that you can create real momentum and then
Mm-hmm.
give 5 to 20 years with momentum, significant things can happen, like really significant things. And that's what I experience. And that's the stuff I teach now.
Okay, now as you mentioned, right, so many mortgages. Now this is something that similar that I did, right? I'm trying to pay up I mean, I just bought a house for investment purposes, and I'm getting rent out of it, so it's fine for me because my income is still surplus. So I'm trying to make money move, as they call it, right? This philosophy of making money move, right, where money does not work unless it is moving. The more it moves, the more how did it play out for you? And if there's one step that people can take right out of the blue, they've got say $100 or right 5,000 rupees in their pocket, right? What step can they take to make their money move if they had to?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, so we call it cash flow, right? Like, how do
Yeah.
we make the money move? And that's kind of an interesting way that you asked the question. Yeah, so if we think about the basics of how money is flowing, we establish income. That's the money, the input, the money coming
Mhm.
in. Now, of course, some of it's already leaking out as it's coming towards you because some of it goes to taxes, some of it will
Yeah.
go into Social Security, some of it can go into retirement accounts, 401k. There's lots of things that will take it, but you'll get some gross amount at some point, and it'll come into your paycheck. Then now the flow is in your hands. What are you doing with it? Well, you're going to have some essential spending. Like, you're gonna have to pay that mortgage bill. You
Yeah.
have to pay those utilities.
Hmm.
There's some things you just have to spend on.
Hmm.
Then now whatever's left, now you have a real decision moment, right? That's on the things that you might want to be spending on, or maybe the things that are the fat in your life, things that you're spending on, like subscriptions that maybe you don't actually need, but you
Hmm.
think you might have needed or you forgot about. And then there's the whatever else is left after your spending's done. Now, does that go into a savings account? Do I invest that? Do I do something else with it? That's where this gets really interesting. Plus, some of those payments that you did, even up before that spot, are getting put into a liquid places like your mortgage, right? That actually is creating principal. That equity is something you can borrow back out of the home, or you
Mhm.
will see as cash later if you were to sell that home. And so we can also talk about 1031 exchanges and ways you could take that home later and think about trading it and doing things. But honestly, that's kind of more advanced stuff. Most people will sell the house and hope that there was enough put into it to get some cash back out of it or
Yeah.
to expand the size of the home. Now, also, some of those deductions might be going into equity for the company you work at. You might be getting stock options
Hmm.
from a company. So that's illiquid as well, because sometimes you have to wait for that to vest. Even after it vests, you might not want to sell it right away because your income might be too high. And now you're paying more taxes. You might want to wait a year and a day to get to long term
Hmm.
capital gains tax. So there's just all these little decisions. And if you're not educated, it gets really, really hard to know what am I supposed to be doing here. And that's
Hmm.
why so many people find themselves in autopilot, right?
Hmm.
Like, oh, I'm told that's the right thing to do. So I do that and I move on my day. And that's completely fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But I'm
Hmm.
saying there are a little bit more education will help those completely fines pile up until you'll be more than fine later when you start making
Yeah.
those moves. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. So I guess the first thing is anywhere on that flow journey, we can make optimizations. And as you start thinking about the output side in particular, that's where a lot of those optimizations can become,
Hmm.
because you can start moving that money to specific types of accounts that will grow with different horizons.
Okay.
So, I can talk about these accounts in particular, and it depends on your situation, right? Like if you have kids that you want to college, you're going to have a special kind of college savings accounts, like 529 accounts, versus if you think about your own retirement. Now we're talking about IRAs. If we're talking about just emergency spending, now we're talking about like savings accounts and stuff. But I'm going to get a little bit more advanced than that, and I want
Hmm.
to talk about passive income as well, because I don't think you should be satisfied with just what you're getting from your job.
Hmm.
I think you want to widen that nozzle so you have more cash coming down to you, so you have more options to move
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
So yeah, some of the moves you make with the cash that's coming down with the existing nozzle can be put in places to widen the nozzle for the next time that you have
Yeah.
cash coming out to you. So there's that as well. And there's lots of passive income stuff we can talk about. We can talk about if you're a stock person, we can talk about dividends or stock optioning. If you're a house person and you're like, okay, I'm learning a lot about this, I want mine, saving up and buying a second property that I rent out. That's actually a really strong one. And it's one that most people I talk to end up getting financial freedom accidentally by is real
Hmm.
estate. I did mine on purpose and I did not touch real estate at all.
Okay.
I just my own personal home. And
Hmm.
now it's part of my plan, but it wasn't part of my plan for when I retired. So you
Hmm.
don't have to do it. But a lot of people will say that's the only way to do it. I can tell you
Hmm.
it's not. There's many ways to do it, but that's probably the most tried path.
Yeah.
um all kinds of options there. So I guess it depends on where you want to focus,
Yeah.
because if it's on the input side or the output side or somewhere in the middle, there's lots of things we could do.
Okay, so let's talk about career planning, right? Since that is something, I mean, you made such moves that you've retired early. This is something like a benchmark people can look at, especially software engineers and computer geeks out there, right? Yeah. Trying to get the max bang for the buck.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, were there any specific certification that you did, or was it like just what the company was demanding, right, at that point of time? And they said, right, if you get this certification, we'll give you a promotion or something of that sort. Because that's
Gotcha.
one easy way to do it, right? The company
Yeah.
says that, yeah, whoever gets this certification will get a one up.
Have you ever noticed that usually companies don't offer you anything monetary until you either are coming in or quitting?
Yeah.
There's almost nothing offered in the middle.
Yeah.
That's by
That's right.
design, because they know most people are on autopilot and they're
Hmm.
hoping that passively their good
Yeah.
work will be acknowledged and they'll get a promotion.
Yeah.
So I learned that way too late. I think I'll be honest, I learned it earlier than I think a lot of people. But once I learned I could force a
Hmm.
stimuli to create
Right.
a monetary reaction,
Hmm.
that was huge. So I ended up not staying at a job for more than 2 years. Now
Okay.
this some of this stuff might be controversial. I have no idea. But this is what I did. So out of college, I got a reasonable job working for some heating and air conditioning company in Columbus, Ohio. They had a small presence, but they were trying to figure out how to create a digital imprint. They wanted to have ways people could find their reps online, could do sizing of different HVAC equipment. I did everything for them. I just basically said, whatever you need, I'll do it. I built websites, I did graphic design, I did on-site installations, whatever I needed to do. It was an amazing job because I was able to learn
Yeah.
all that stuff. I loved it. I was able to stretch myself as a young person in a lot of big ways, built some confidence too, but I got paid nothing for that. I mean, really, they barely paid me. No stock options, very poor retirement account. I did the match just because my dad told me to, which is great. I have to thank him for that. I didn't know what it was. I was like, you want to take more money out of my paycheck? Why should I do that? Screw
Yeah.
that. But I did that. Luckily, that ended up working out. But yeah, it wasn't a high paying job. And after just a couple years, I was just looking at my spreadsheet and I was like, I barely moved this thing. And we were having our first kid, and I was like, okay, that's going to be expensive. So I made a move. I said, I can't control our spending any more than I already am. So I need to switch my job. And I started getting my resume out there and was looking for a job while I had a job. And I got an offer at a company in a different city. So, I mean, I had to commute over an hour. Well, I didn't want to move. So I decided to do the drive. And this company just made like content manuals. They like the actual instruction manuals that you get with stuff. They made these, they designed the databases and the printing services. So I was building software for that. That was a neat job too. And I was with a lot more devs now. I went from being the only person to being in a team of 100 people.
Mhm.
And that gave me room to grow. I could get
Yeah.
promotions now. Couldn't get promotions before, but now because I moved to a different company, I was able to become a lead. And then eventually I became a manager. Now
Mhm.
that was interesting, but I still was still getting paid very badly. I was making $80,000 a year. Now this was a while ago, but that was still not great. And I remember going, okay, well, I'm making an extra $15,000 now, but I'm still not seeing a lot of movement. I decided we took a vacation to Seattle for a video game conference. My wife and I went to the Penny Arcade conference.
Mhm.
I'm a gamer. And we're walking around the city, and my wife made the mistake of saying, wow, this is a kind of a beautiful city. I could almost see living here. And I went, oh, really? Okay.
Let's check it
And
out.
yeah, without asking her permission, I applied to Microsoft as soon as we got
Mhm.
back because I knew that, well, I was a fan of their programming IDE. I like Visual Studio a lot. And I knew that that was a big company and I could probably get paid better. Well, they flew me out and the interview went really well. And then I had an offer like the day I got back.
Mhm.
And I was blown away with how much more money they were going to pay me.
Right.
And I mean, okay, I'm blown away. They were willing to pay me $100,000, and
Mhm.
a lot of people are going to go, "Oh my gosh, that's not a lot of money. Why is he so blown away?" Well, that was like a $15,000 increase. Plus, they're going to give me a signing bonus. I'd never even heard of that. I'm like, "You'll give me money
Yeah.
just for agreeing to come
Joined.
on,"
Yeah.
and they were going to give me equity. Some actual
Mhm.
stock shares of Microsoft, which I'm like, I didn't know anything about investing at all. I'd not done it at that point.
Mhm.
I was like, well, that's got to be good, right? So my wife, when she heard how much more they were going to pay me, she was like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to have to do this, aren't we?" And we moved, and I had no idea how much more expensive Washington
Mhm.
State was until I started looking at houses. And wow, in Ohio, you can buy a house for anywhere between 60,000 to, maybe $150,000 back when I was living there. Now you can spend more now for sure, but that was generally, you wouldn't spend more than $150,000 on a house.
Mhm.
You couldn't find a house in Washington, even in the rural parts, for under $400,000. That was starting
Right.
price. That
Mhm.
was significant jump. That scared me because I had a mortgage. And by the way, the housing crisis happened like the next year. So it was like timing was horrible here. But
Yeah.
we decided to buy a home when we already owned a home, thinking we'd be able to sell it. Of
Mhm.
course, we weren't able to sell it because of the crash. But yeah, we picked a city far out, like out in the boonies that we could get more
Mhm.
land cheaper. I was doing a horrible commute, but it was a move. And the move is what's important. And here was the important thing for the financial part. I increased my salary, but I tried in every way I could not to increase the size of our cost of living. So our food was more expensive, utilities were a little more expensive, housing and mortgage was more expensive, a lot more expensive.
Mhm.
But we actually looked for other places to optimize, and we were careful about our spending in other ways. That set us apart, I think, from a lot of other people because we just didn't want our lifestyle to, you know, basically
Wow.
continue to inflate.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that was really key. And that was something I constantly always had to continue to do throughout my plan because
Mhm.
costs will always go, like inflation is around. Like think about cost today versus in the 70s, 80s, 90s. They're always going to
Yeah.
go up. So $1 will get you a lot less far in the future than it will today. And you always have to think about that. So you need to know where you are willing to make those moves, either with spending or income. So
Mhm.
I worked at Microsoft and I had worked for that company with like 100 people in it, right? Well, at Microsoft, that's like one little part of a group. Like it's this massive company of companies.
Yes.
And I was working in the research division, working on education software. And it was a really cool part. I had no idea how lucky I was to land in that
Mhm.
place. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't a business oriented place. So there's no real ship cycle. You just got to make stuff that mattered. People were passionate, people were kind, everyone was smart. It was amazing. I loved it. It was so much fun. I was learning. I was an expert in something called Silverlight, which was a technology that's gone now, but I knew XAML really well. And I was helping people. I was setting myself apart. I had a trajectory. It was just perfect. And I could see financially we were moving the needle. Finally, it was really moving. Our debt was gone except for the mortgage. The mortgages were tough, but I knew that was the debt
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And otherwise, though, income, I was getting more cash flow. And I started to realize, okay, now that I have some cash, I got to do something smart with it. That's when I started thinking about investing. And I'm like, I can put a little bit of this into the stock market every paycheck. And I'm like, I started saying, how do you do that? What's a good move? And I started learning about the S&P 500 and like the top most profitable companies and market
Mhm.
cap. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just put a little bit into that every time and I'll let that grow. And then whenever I did well at Microsoft, they would give you a little bit extra stock and it was worth something like $8 a share back then. You look at the price now, you're gonna go, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
can't believe it. You got
Yeah.
so lucky. Well, they weren't giving me a ton of shares, but got a little bit there. And so what I will tell you though about that part of the journey is there's a good and bad thing about working at a place like Microsoft.
Mhm.
The good thing is you're always able to grow. Your human capital can grow as much as you want it to grow. You'll hit a wall at some point and it's very frustrating. Microsoft has all starts and stops. They'll like, oh, we're going to build something. You'll build it. It'll almost be ready to ship and they'll cancel it. That was constantly happening. And it's just soul crushing to work so hard. And they will take as much time out of you as you can give. I was working like 60-hour minimum weeks
Yeah.
when I was there. And it's like you just give, you give, you give, you give, and you're doing everything you can. And
Mhm.
it's like, oh, what more could I have done here? But the nice thing about it is when you hit that wall, when you're done, you don't have to leave the company. You can go to a different group.
Mhm.
So and sometimes that's not even a choice. Like they just have reorgs and they push you around.
Mhm.
The first reorg was research. I didn't want to leave that group, and I got pushed into the office product group. Places that make like Word and Excel and everything.
Mhm.
Hated it. I don't want to recommend it to anyone. Some
Yeah.
people work there and love it. I'm not trying to put it down for everyone. I'm sure it's great if you're in the right group in the right way. But where I was trying to do education, and the
Mhm.
office group was a horrible match. All they wanted to do is push office licenses, but we were trying to make education products for schools that they didn't want to pay any money for.
Mhm.
So that was just a mismatch and it was a rough experience for me. But then I moved to Xbox. I worked in entertainment services. I was in Windows Phone. I worked in the Windows operating system. I ended up working in a licensing group. I mean, it's like all these crazy places. And these kinds of moves, what they can do is create new opportunities for you. And so what I ended up doing, it was whenever I felt I was getting stuck or stagnant, I made a move. Instead of before, I had to switch companies every 2 years. In Ohio, I ended up working at 4 different companies. At Microsoft, I ended up working in like 10 different product groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to move up from what they call it SDE, software development engineer. I went, SDE 2 and senior SDE and principal SDE. I was a lead and did some management for a while. Then I went over to a product manager.
Mm-hmm.
When I ran out of room on the SDE ladder, I went to the product manager. I did that for a while, and then eventually I became a program manager. And then Google headhunted me. They said, we need you for some cloud thing we're doing. And that felt great. I built my human capital up so large
Mm-hmm.
that a huge competitor, local competitor, said they wanted me. That feels really great when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you're doing something right. And I remember going, oh, okay, I don't know if I only want to just look at this one offer. And I talked to Epic Games. They were looking at me for a job, studio lead job, and a different Microsoft role. And I actually used those and I negotiated those offers against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the best offer I could with Google. And I worked at Google for 4 years, and then I hit my retirement goal and I quit.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, yeah, this is the story people aspire to be in, right? I mean, either you jump companies or either you jump roles inside a huge conglomerate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now the headhunting part. Okay,
Yeah.
that one thing before I close this conversation, the headhunting part, right? At what point, what year was this? If just to get some reference.
That would have been 2019.
Right. So yeah, still pre-COVID, but then again,
Mhm.
just want to ask, how active were you with your LinkedIn profile, or probably
Uh,
creating a social media profile and letting other people know that you're doing awesome stuff, right? Because I don't know how exactly headhunting works if you have
yeah.
no social media profile
Yeah.
or no LinkedIn profile. So if you
Yeah.
can just share some information on that so that people can get some reference.
Yeah. I'm not a huge social media person. I personally find that it's a great tool to amplify something. But other than that, it's trying to distract you
Uh-huh.
generally from the things you're trying to do. And so for me, Facebook is not something I like to use at all,
Yeah.
um, including Instagram. Any meta product I avoid. I find they're just there to distract your attention. But LinkedIn I use, and I use it pretty rigorously because it is a tool towards my goals,
Right.
and I use it with that in mind. So yeah, it was worth getting my profile to a certain place. Now, I
Mhm.
did not mark myself as looking for a job. Now, I know you could do that privately now, so
Mhm.
that could be a powerful move. If you're like where I was and you're thinking, "Hey, I'm interested. I want to tell my employer," you could do that. But for me, I just want to make sure I had the right skills listed so that when they scrape, they could put me into thetheir queue. And
Mhm.
that's almost like when I was talking about the finances stuff, like making your money work for you. That's making your human capital work for you, because you're
Yeah.
taking them every time you acquire a new skill. You should think, how do I capitalize on this skill? And even if it's just putting it on a LinkedIn profile or some other site that you think
Mhm.
is valuable for displaying your skill, it's worth it. Doing it in a post, I don't think so. That's too ephemeral. You want
Mhm.
to do something that's stickier than that. So, like an actual profile thing, something that really shows your credentials. Like every patent I got, I listed. I actually later, I wished I did this earlier, but later I started asking people to go and put a credential on, like actually go and
Recommendation,
recognize
right?
me, recommendations. I didn't do enough of that, to be honest. I should have even done more of that kind of thing. That would have
Mhm.
been great. But I still get headhunted. I'm retired and I'm still getting people asking me to come work at these companies, Apple, all they constantly ask me to come and work there on this or that because of something that's still on that profile they put on there like 7 years ago.
Right.
I'm like holographic computing. I worked in the HoloLens group for a little bit. I
Yeah.
still constantly get people asking me to come work on that stuff. I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
think my skills are up to date for you. I'm sorry.
So yeah,
Yeah, that stuff goes fun. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard that headhunters are always scraping profiles, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if LinkedIn is the place to be, because, well, every other company is on LinkedIn these days, and they just have the whole system set in place, right? obviously you have a lot of other tools that people are using for getting headhunted, some other platform or to getting for getting jobs. But then again, LinkedIn is the place to be at this point of time because everybody is there.
I think so, but it's also kind of in a weird place right now. Like people have kind
Yeah.
of stopped using it as a professional network and started using it as like a new Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not making it. There's a lot of garbage on there now, and also headhunters and recruiters are they're kind of in a weird place too, where there is a lot of civility seems to be gone. It's very competitive now, and I would say it's not good enough just to put stuff on LinkedIn and think good things are going to happen. Like
Yeah.
I think again, I would continue. Like if I was just doing a consultation with someone, I would continue to push you to work on your own human capital, your own skills.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn's just a place to display it. It's not a place to guarantee an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people who are serious about making job moves know that you have to push more than you have to pull. Like you have to be willing to go and like actually push on your network and say, hey, can you help me? Do you know of anything? Can you post on my behalf? That works really well.
Yeah,
Asking someone that you trust to do a post because that's going to have much further reach than your own network will.
that's right.
But also just getting in the habit anytime in your career of just every time you meet someone, add them and
Yeah.
then see if there's anyone new that pops up that you could also add. Just like getting to that habit and just kind of widen the net. I wish I had done more of that because now that I'm in a retirement situation, I wrote a book and I do podcasting to give this education out. And LinkedIn has been my best net, but I wish it was wider. I wish I had connected with more people that I knew could benefit
Mm-hmm.
from this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to lean on other people I'm meeting now, like doing this, which is great. I love this. I can, hopefully reach some folks here. But I wish I could have done more with my own network. So, reeling that like you're growing this garden, it
Mm-hmm.
is worth it, even if it doesn't seem like it's paying off right away.
All right, Daniel. I mean, this conversation has been, I mean, it's been slow and steady, but a lot of insights about real practical stuff that you did and what others can emulate, right? About financial planning, running through their own numbers. And because when it comes to personal finance, there's a lot of things that needs to be done on a personal level, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much you can tell or I can tell or somebody else can tell people to do. A lot of work needs to be done by themselves. So thank you so much for giving people that opportunity to think about, right? Something of that sort. For the people who don't know, 401k can be referred to as a pension fund when you're looking at any other country, right? So
Yeah.
just for reference. Okay, so how can people get to know you and why is there escape the clock written on your window?
Sure. Yeah. So when I did my early retirement, got a lot of attention. People said, "Hey, how were you able to do this?" And we
Hmm.
can't. A lot of people were doing much better than I was. So they asked me to write a book. So I wrote the book. I wasn't planning to do that, but ended up doing really well. It actually won 4 awards. It actually just got the best book award at the American Writings Award this just a couple weeks ago for best personal finance book. It won best retirement book and it won Best Investing Book. So it did really well. I'm really proud of it. It is a comprehensive guide. It is a personal thing, like you said. Everyone's situation is different. Your goals are different. So I didn't want to write yet another book on here's what this is, here's what that is. I do have all that stuff in there because you have to know the fundamentals, but it's teaching you how to do the personal thing that you need to do to get your plan, which is completely unique from anyone else's plan. So if you're interested in that book, you can find it on every single publisher, Amazon everywhere. But if you go to escapetheclock.com, it's there as well. Plus the planner, that spreadsheet I use to retire, I made it into a template. I give it out for free. It's had over 1,000 downloads. You can go grab that. It's at escapetheclock.com/planner. Also, I do free consultations. I don't know why. I just trying to help. So if you like, you can go to escapetheclock.com/schedule and get a free one-on-one with me where I will help you. I will never charge you anything. We will just go through and I'll help you get started with your plan. And I also do a podcast now because I find that's the best way to continue to help and talk about and bring experts on. So you can
Hmm.
go to escapetheclock.com/podcast if you want to find this on every major platform that comes out weekly. But yeah, here to help. Hopefully others can do this because it's awesome when you get your time back. It's completely worth it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you for all these insights, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people checking back on your website for that, for all the information that you're sharing. To the audience who's been watching and listening intently, if you liked what we talked about, do leave a like. The comment section is open for questions, suggestions, and any other perspectives that you have for what we talked about. And don't forget to subscribe before you close the window itself. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you. Appreciate it.